The Liberation of Sundrian City by Andrew Lewis. Chapter 6. A Firm Kick. There is no hiding the fact that he beats us, Linus, said Evander, pointing to the scar across his face. Linus was sat on his bed, brooding over the fact that he had still had a bruise on his face. He was going to miss the rest day show. I can't, he replied simply. Oh, come on, said Evander, a little exasperated. It's only fair that the world knows what Henry does to you. Linus considered the point. His father was not the type to care about his reputation. There were certainly plenty of times he had displayed his rage in public. The allure of the elephants was overbearing. You really think I should go out like this? He asked. I really do. Besides, if somebody asks you about the bruise, you can always just make something up. Tell them you had a fight with the very criminal they are about to see. Not as if there will be anyone alive to argue that. Linus laughed. Evander was a good friend, and had been since Linus was born. He had a knack for making him feel better about things, particularly about his father. After a short while of further hesitation, Linus eventually made up his mind to attend the rest day show. It was a warm day, and as the show was already due to have started, the streets were empty. As he made his way to the pit, Linus couldn't help but notice how dirty the streets were when empty. The cobbled stone paths were unswept, cracks ran through the stone walls of the homes, and every now and then a strong waft of urine would blow past. Special residencies, he scoffed. I don't see what's so special. In fact, the more he thought about it, the more he realised that he preferred the outer districts of the city, where the farmers and substandard craftsmen lived. When he was much younger, he had slept a few nights at a friend's house on a farm down near the wall. It hadn't been bad at all. On the contrary, the family was friendly. The house was clean and rather roomy, and the food was the freshest he'd ever had. It was an unspoken secret between farmers that, although by law they were to reserve the finest of their crops to be sent to the palace, there was nothing stopping them from sneaking a few pieces home for themselves. And so the poorest people in the city ate like kings most evenings, most unbeknownst to anyone else. Couple this with the fact that the stress levels of their lowly lives was significantly less, and suddenly the outer parts of the city, the poorer region, didn't look too bad at all. It seemed to Linus that what his parents, and indeed the rest of the people in the Emperor's special residencies, considered to be a better life, was not better at all. The rest day show was unremarkable. The elephant, as always, held Linus in awe, but the rest of the proceedings seemed like a boring formality. Remy's speech was terrifying and enlightening, as per usual. The Emperor wore a fine silk gown and ate turkey meat and chilled wine. Criminals screamed in terror and pain and died one by one. And then it was over and Linus left. As the crowd dispersed, Linus spotted Jeremy, weaving his way through the crowd a lot more confidently than he had only weeks ago. Jeremy, he called out, but Jeremy didn't seem to hear, and kept weaving through the crowd. Linus followed, calling to Jeremy again, and wondering what was wrong with his hearing. As he came onto the city straight road, he called once more, and this time he was sure that Jeremy could hear, but still Jeremy didn't turn. Jeremy, I know you can hear me. What's going on with you? Said Linus, getting rather frustrated. Suddenly Jeremy stopped and turned. He came to Linus, and as he did, Linus saw that Jeremy had tears streaming down his face, and understood why he was trying to evade him. Tanner, the prick, he said, before Linus had asked anything. Tears were still running down his face as he spoke. What's he done? I'll thump him, demanded Linus, outraged. Called me scum. Said my family was a disgrace and that the Emperor should have expelled from the city for having such a useless crop. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. But the Emperor told us to grow the poppies. It's not our fault. We aren't to defy the Emperor, are we? Poppies? Asked Linus, suddenly realising that he'd never known what Jeremy's family grew. It's a flower. A useless, rotten flower. We dash the seed pods and collect the milk that seeps out when it dries up, and it all goes straight to the palace. Even my folks don't know why a frig wants it. And Tanner, that big-headed prick, he thinks that just because he's from the special residencies that he's better than me, but he wouldn't know the half of what my family has struggled through. Listen, Jeremy, you don't have to worry about anything Tanner says. He really is a spoiled brat, and trust me, the special residencies aren't as special as they would have you believe. There's not a happy person in there. He pointed to his bruised eye and concluded, not one. He went on to confide in Jeremy all the things that his father had done, and soon enough Jeremy had settled a little. But for all the things that Linus had to complain about in his past, what he didn't realise was that the worst was still to come. Indeed, at that very moment, the worst had already begun, and would become a reality for him that very afternoon. In fact, his life would change forever from the moment he stepped in his front door. Jeremy was a little cheerier by the time Linus bid him goodbye and turned toward his house. "See you next time," he called, the smile replenished on his round face. Neither of them knew, of course, that they would never meet again. Linus opened his front door to find that the kitchen was empty. Strange, he thought. His mother usually slaved in the kitchen from the afternoon onwards. He was tempted to call out, but didn't. He stood still, listening hard. He heard nothing at all. It was eerily quiet. Maybe he should just sneak to bed unnoticed, he thought. When he went to the bedroom, he was surprised to see that Evander was missing too. His loot lay on the bed. What was he going to eat if his mother wasn't cooking? What's going on here, he asked himself aloud. Linus crossed the room and sat on his bed, but didn't stay there long. He was curious now. He had to figure out why the house was empty on a rest day afternoon. He scoured the rooms of the house, starting in the kitchen. Carrots and potatoes had been chopped and left on the bench. A radish was left half chopped. The knife lay on the ground. He found that the sunroom was empty too, Henry absent from his usual rest day post. Next he tried his parents' bedroom, also empty. The entire house seemed empty. But there was still one room to check, the basement. It wasn't likely that Evander, Henry and Ava were all in the factory on the rest day evening, unless perhaps something had happened down there. He crossed to the wooden stairwell hatch at the far end of the sunroom and stood staring at it, trying to see through the wood. He listened hard, trying to hear as if from beyond the wood too. He lifted it slowly and descended the steep wooden steps. The factory was dimly lit by some candles over by the feather sorting desk. He could hear heavy breathing, nearly panting, coming from the direction of the desk. He took a step forward and paused. "Mother?" The panting continued, accompanied by a loud sniff. "Evander?" "Yes, Linus, I'm here," came a whispered response. Linus walked forward, trying to see around the mound of coal from where the whisper had come. But as he did, he noticed the blood splattered on the floor and traced it up to the edge of the desk, and that's where he saw him. Lying, face down, on the stone floor in a pool of blood was Henry Smith. "Father," he breathed, and ran forward to the body. Evander looked across from behind the coal. He was sitting in it as if it was some kind of hammock, his chest heaving loudly. While Linus surveyed the body, frantically looking for signs of life, Evander spoke. "I've lied to you, Linus. There is no other way to experience this." Linus looked to see Evander staring darkly at his hands. "There is no beauty ingrained in this. It's just," he paused whimsically, "death. I can play the lute until my hands bleed, but there is no comparing with this blood on my hands right now." Linus froze. "Where's Ava?" he asked. And at that, Evander began to rise from his seat in the coal. He crossed past Linus and started backing slowly toward the hatch, speaking as he did so. "Linus, she's in the stock." "In the stock?" Linus repeated, as it didn't quite make sense to him how somebody could be in the stock. He walked to the other side of the room where the arrow shelves stood. When he rounded the shelf, she came into view. tangled among a mess of arrows which stuck both around and through her. He saw Ava Smith hanging limply against the shelf. "You killed them," Linus gasped. Shock and then anger grew in him. He looked back at his mother, blood trickling all over her body. He grabbed an arrow and rounded on Evander. "You don't want to do that, Linus," said Evander, backing slowly toward the stairs, his eyes on the razor-sharp point protruding from Linus's grasp. "Why don't you come here and finish the family off, Evander?" came Linus's reply, bravery now coursing throughout his body. Suddenly Evander sprang to the stairs and started to climb them. Linus leapt forth and jabbed the arrow at Evander's ankle, but the arrow was intercepted by Evander's left hand, piercing straight through it. He heaved and grunted in pain, and as Linus moved forward to grab his legs, Evander delivered a firm kick to Linus's cheek, sending him to the ground hard. On impact, his head collided with the surface and he blacked out. When he came to, the room was empty. Evander was long gone.